Well, hey, welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, where we are unlocking the secrets that the wealthy know and the government won't tell you. Not really. They actually do tell you, right? I mean, Bob,
They do.
you've said it
Yeah.
before. It's in black
Yep.
and white. So they
Yep.
actually do tell you, but it is hard to find.
Yes.
And for those of us who I would consider very talented and acumen-based business owners who are also financially illiterate and no longer want to be that, this is the show for you.
What was
Right.
written in stone? The Ten Commandments.
Right.
Well, what happened
Even
to the
those got
percent?
broken.
Right? so even those had to be redone. So, planning is really not written in stone.
I'd rather have a plan and change it than not have a plan to begin with.
Yeah.
And I thought there was such wisdom in that. And so I think as business owners, sometimes I think we do feel like special forces.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
we're out there. And to
Yeah.
your point, it's like, let's at least create a pathway and a plan.
Yeah.
And then we can change that as we go.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about today's episode because we're going to get into some real practical how-tos. We're going to actually work with we'll call it a use case or a case study. What do they say? The names and places have changed to protect the innocent.
Yes.
So we'll use a scenario that I'd love to put forth to you, Bob, and then you can give me your feedback in like, okay, cool. Here's a sample plan that we might use. And as we're coming into the fourth quarter of 2023, doesn't matter what time you're listening to this, but you've got time to do some planning before the end of this year to actually enact some of these strategies. So, and how's your day going, Bob, before we dive in?
I'm amazing. Yeah, no, a day's going great. And, before we dive into it, just want to make sure we do a disclaimer of indicating that, this is whatever we talk about here today is really educational purposes only. It's not going to be considered financial advice, tax advice, legal advice, or any advice. It's just two guys talking about different strategies, use cases that we've done in the past with other particular clients. We actually knew their situation and created a plan and took them through our process. So, but just for here though, this is just for educational purposes only.
Yeah, well said, because, just because someone's building a home doesn't mean that you know how to build their home. It's like each case is so significant and distinct from one another. So, but that being said, I also think it's helpful to say, oh, here's how another home was built and
Yes.
how this could happen. So
Absolutely.
we'll kind of play the game of, we'll just pretend I'm just average Joe business owner who's successful in what I'm doing. I've got some income that is above and beyond what's quote unquote needed to live my lifestyle that I want. And looking at the scenario, if I'm looking at what was the book written a million years ago, The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yes.
I can't remember the author's name.
Clausen or Clausen.
Yeah. So like, anyway,
Yeah.
written a long time ago, but
Yeah.
phenomenal book. And there's a principle in it where he talks about like putting your money, like creating a little army of money that goes to work for you. And so I think some of it we'll talk about today. We'll dive into that. But let's say I'm average Joe business owner, and I've got a successful business. It's paying the bills. It's affording me the lifestyle that I want to live. And at the end of the year, every year, there's some money that I can take as a owner's draw or distribution for myself. In previous episodes, we've talked about how expensive it is to extract that from your business to use for lifestyle. But let's say I'm making $500,000 a year. And to live the lifestyle that I want to live, to take the vacations I want to take, to live in the home that I want to live in and drive the cars and all the stuff, right? Daily life. Let's say that's $300,000 a year, $25,000 a month that I'm spending from that. But then there's this excess of, call it $200,000 of income that I don't need.
Mhm.
But I'm taking, and it is being absorbed by my family.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes,
it is being
yes.
spent.
Yes.
It's not that it's not being spent. It is being spent.
Yeah.
But at what level? So can you maybe break down a scenario and say, okay, well, if that were me, and you can ask whatever questions in this hypothetical scenario to give your advice, but what advice would you have? Like, how would you structure something to do with that $200,000?
Yeah. So we have an entire process that we take. We have a membership structure. So when people come into our our house, so to speak. We have a membership structure, and there's a certain process of data gathering, fact finding, and diving into the analytics of the data, making sure that certain things are met, and we have a good understanding of a particular situation of somebody. So the type of compensation that they're legally allowed to take out, or the minimum compensation they're legally allowed to take out of their business, mapping out their cash flow, to your point, 300,000, right? 25,000 a month. What's that look like? Finding out, hey, do you as a business owner want to pay off your mortgage? Right? Do you want to pay off your house? Is that something that's of a goal for you? Are you looking to retire, traditional retire, not, sitting on the lazy boy, reading the newspaper or reading the tablet of newspapers, smoking a cigar or a pipe? We're not talking about that type of retirement. But what do you want to do? Or are you like a lot of business owners where, you say, I don't know, what would I do? Right. We like to travel. I like spending time with my family. I know that, our kids are adults, so we're probably going to have grandkids at some point. I'd like to spend some time visiting. Okay. So this traditional thought process of retirement, which was really started in the 50s, is not a real thing that we as human creatures are used to. Okay. So what we do is with business owners is retirement is more of lifestyle adjustments, right?
Right.
What can I do? What can we do to help you structure your business to where you can have more time outside of your business, visit family, grandkids, go traveling, but also still have the control of your business, and your business continue to have control over its process, its revenues, its cash flow, and that sort of stuff. Okay.
So if we just pause here for a moment, because
Sure.
I think this is a thought that's going through a lot of business owners' minds, as it did mine. My goal was to build a healthy enough income where I can be the boss, right? I don't have to go get a job. That's like that first level of extraction where it's like, I'm the boss, business is paying my bills, I can live the life that I want, and I can work when I want. I heard somebody say this the other day. Being a business owner just means you get to choose which 80 hours you want to work per
Yes.
week. Right?
Yeah. I always say you get to choose your headaches.
Yeah, that's all it is, right? It's like
Yeah.
There's something inside of us as entrepreneurs, I think, that is, we just tick differently than your average bear.
Yeah.
So I have this idea. I'm going to build this base level of income that's going to pay for my lifestyle. Then we start thinking, okay, well, how long can I do this for? Do I want to do this when I'm 90? If I live that long, do I want to be doing this at 75? Maybe yes, maybe no. But then my brain started, as a freedom seeking, like adventure loving, orienteering kind of person, I'm always looking at how do I extract myself from this and set up the life that I want. And you had mentioned this. So I want to travel, or I want to see the kids, wherever they're at in the country, whatever it might be. So my goal was always build a business that I can sell. I forget what the exact number was that I wanted. I think I wanted like $8 million exit, and after paying taxes that I'd have enough money. I think it was going to yield, by investing in the stock market at a 5% return, yield
Did your homework.
400,000. Yeah, I mean, that was like the game that I invented in my mind. And when I've heard you talk about investing or building assets, it's very different than I'm just going to go get a 5% return from the stock market. Although I think that's what most business owners are feeling. Can I build enough value to sell this entity for enough money to invest it in the stock market and generate a return so I can live the life I want? I think that's where most people who are entrepreneurs, that's where our brain is kind of orienting towards. What I've heard you talk about is very different from that. So maybe talk with me, like, if that is my goal, let's say, I'm 40, I'm almost 46. Let's say I want to retire at 55. I want to be able to do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it. Like, what's the pathway to get there for me?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that we need to understand is the type of business you're in. Is it a business that we can scale to where we can do what Benjamin Hardy wrote in his book, Who, Not How? Are we able to find people, hire employees, or bring on business partners who may have ownership, but have the ability that maybe they're younger, but still have the expertise that you have to sustain the business a little bit longer so you can have more of a lifestyle and an exit? Right. Do you have children involved? Are you in a business where, like we experienced in 2020 to 2022, right? Are you in a business to where you could be considered shut down, or you're in a business where you may or may not be essential? You're in a situation where you can't necessarily make changes.
Let's say I am a scalable business. Kids don't want any, and I think I'm seeing this a lot. Kids are not wanting to be involved in their parents' succession plans. They're like, I saw you go through the headaches. I don't want those headaches.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say no kids involved for the future of it, but it is scalable, meaning I can go find the who's to replace me. So let's say those scenarios are in place.
Yeah. So then what we would do is we would start building out a plan based on that 7 years, right? You're 46 and you said what, 55?
Yeah, we'll say 7 years. Yeah.
7 years. Okay. So we'll build out a plan for the 7 years. And so what we also want to do is we understand as a business owner that your business creates your personal lifestyle, right? So your home, your different activities, your cars, those types of things, what do you want? Do you want your mortgage paid off? So we want to make sure that, do you want your mortgage paid off now, or do you want it in 7 years, you want to make sure it's paid off? Do you want to sell your house, downsize, upsize, right? Do you want to maybe sell the house and go to a place where you can have family retreats where the kids come? So these are all things that we bring up in a conversation that are part of the plan. It doesn't have to have answers today, but we like to plant seeds to kind of get people thinking that there are different possibilities. And even if you decide to change from now to 7 years, our planning process is designed to adjust to that. There is no written in stone. I mean, even if you think about it, what was written in stone? The 10 Commandments. Well, what happened?
Even
to the
those
first
got
set?
broken,
right? so even those had to be redone. So planning is really not written in stone.
Still, and I think I think this is a really good point. One of my close friends was he wasn't a Green, he was an Army Ranger for 23 years.
Wow.
So special forces operator,
Amazing.
served all over the world.
Yeah.
And what he said is, you always want to go, I'd rather have a plan and change it than not have a plan to begin with.
Yes.
And I thought there was such wisdom in that. And so I think as business owners, sometimes I think we do feel like special forces.
Yeah.
It's like we're out there. And to your point, it's like, let's at least create a pathway and a plan.
Yeah.
And then we can change that as we go.
Yeah.
And we can always come back to that line. But I think that's the case. So let's say in this scenario, so scalable business, no kids that want to be involved in the succession. We have a mortgage on our house, but it's at 3%. So I don't care about necessarily paying that off immediately. But when I'm done, when I do this exit, I would like to have that paid for. And I'd like to buy a vacation home or somewhere to go, be with the family in the mountains.
Perfect. Okay. So now that we have all that, right, and there's a whole bunch of other points in this process, but let's just keep this high level. And we look at, okay, well, you have 300,000 is your lifestyle, and you said you have about 200,000 that's left over. And so we put a plan together to where that 200,000 ends up staying in the business. Okay, as cash flow. Now, let me clarify what I mean when I say cash flow. We talk about income, we talk about revenue, right? Let me clarify what the definition of each of these words are. Okay. So when I'm a business and I create sales or products that return revenue, okay? So the revenue is the thing that we earn from our business doing what it does.
Okay.
Out of that revenue, we pay expenses.
So would that be is revenue like gross income? Is that synonymous?
A lot of times that's how people view it, as gross income. But one of the things that we always tell people is that, remember, income is taxable. Cash flow is plannable. Okay. So if we keep using the word income, we're saying we're okay with our money being taxed. But if we use the word revenue, cash flow, then we understand that the only thing that is going to be taxed is the purposeful income that we choose to become income. Okay. It's like saying, hey, when you talk to a lot of people, that you have to speak it into truth, right? If you say you're fat and you're dumb, and you do that for 20 years, you're going to be fat and dumb. Right. You want to
manifest what you want, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Think what you want to be. And so we need to understand these words, because these words have purpose in the accounting structure as well. Cash flow is what's left over after your revenue and expenses.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when we do a profit and loss statement, revenue minus expenses equals profit or loss. That's because that's a financial statement. But before we file a financial statement, we have cash flow.
Okay.
Cash flow is what we get to plan. Now, we as an owner may decide to plan some of that cash flow to be W-2 income for myself as an owner. Okay, great. We purposely said that cash flow is going to be income.
And that would be like of the 300,000. So
Correct.
of the 300,000, like some of it's going to be some form of W-2.
Correct.
There's going to be some more amount,
just a distribution. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And the reason why we want W-2 and distributions, because there's in most businesses, they're pass-throughs, meaning that whatever profit and loss there is comes to you as the individual taxpayer, and you pay your tax rate. So remember our previous episode, we talked about the income funnel and progressive tax system, effective, marginal. That's what essentially that means. Okay. Is that so if I all of a sudden say, okay, I have my cash flow, I have taken my W-2, I have distributions, there's something we call cost basis. And these are some accounting terms. I'm not going to get totally nerdy on you, but cost basis is very important in the planning process.
Okay. So
important that the IRS most recently are requiring businesses and CPAs to calculate cost basis, which they didn't before a few years ago. Okay. Why? Because cost basis allows you to justifiably lose money in a business and take that loss, remember profit or loss, to take that loss that passes through to you as an individual taxpayer that goes on your individual tax return. What does a negative income mean? It offsets positive income, lowers your tax rate.
Okay.
What was happening was that nobody was calculating cost basis. And so the IRS had no baseline of understanding if this was a real loss or was this an over distribution of losses. And they treat it differently. So, but the reason why I say
what would you say? So cost basis, simple terms, I'm a financial moron and I no longer want to be. So
it's a principal in your business.
Okay, so it's the principal amount in your business, and that's what they want you to calculate each year so that you can, so that they can understand what's happening in reality.
Correct, because principal in any investment that grows, that principal is not taxable. It's the growth that's taxable. Right?
Which would be, is that capital gains? Is that what that's called?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
So you've got your cost basis is the principal, and each year you're saying that can change?
It can, because it's based on your revenue and your cash flow in your business.
Got it. Okay.
So you can take it out as W-2, and that lowers your cost basis because you took it out as W-2 income. Or you can take some W-2, you leave the cash flow, right? Now we're getting really nerdy. This is the fun stuff, right? This is where most people want to say, okay, I'm going to pause it and go to the bathroom, right? So the cost basis is so important because it gives us as a planning tool how much we're allowed to distribute out of the business from a cash flow perspective and still have a tax benefit. That's a planning tool. That's what we want. We want to have that calculation. And so the IRS said, okay, time out. We, the IRS, want a better understanding, but also we want to give you, as our taxpayers, as adults raising their kids, here's the rules. We want you to understand a rule. So if you break a rule, you understand why you're being put on timeout, why there's a consequence. If you play by the rule, this is why you're getting a lollipop. Right. Or, ice cream cone, right? Whatever. Right. In government, IRS terms, it's tax savings. This is why you're getting your tax savings. If you don't, this is why you're going to get extra taxes as capital gains. Okay.
Right.
So that's kind of high level. And I apologize for diving into that because that becomes important in the planning process. And if you're not planning.
And again, we're financially illiterate who no longer want to be. And so understanding these concepts, and as I've learned from you, it's very empowering. So I know, yeah, maybe our brain wants to tune it out because we've sucked at this in the past, but if we want to gain this knowledge to really set ourselves up to build assets and build long-term wealth, these things do become important for us to understand, at least conceptually. So
Yeah.
you don't need to apologize. I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank
So
you for
when
thanking me.
everything, yeah, so when everything's said and done, I've got this extra $200,000 that's on top of
Correct.
everything, and I want to have a plan for that. I recognize now how expensive it is to absorb that into my lifestyle. So I don't want to do that anymore. I want to create a plan for this cash flow because, as you said, income gets taxed, but cash flow can be planned,
Plannable.
right? So what do I want to do? What's the plan for this 200,000?
So this 200,000, what we usually do is we put a structure in place to where we want with the asset with the brain, us, we want to dictate to this 200,000 where it's going to go and what other assets. Okay.
Okay.
So we can utilize this asset, this 200,000, and we can actually use that asset to invest in another business.
Okay.
And by doing that, it creates that new business. What's the cost basis? The 200,000.
Hmm.
Right. But
So like actually buy like equity in another company or
absolutely, you could buy equity in another company. You can start your own company from scratch, just like you did already as a business owner.
and just use that cash and then it's essentially planned away so it's not going to be taxed. It's actually it becomes it becomes the principal of the new company, right? Is
Becomes
that what
principal of the new company. Now it could be taxed in your existing company. Okay.
right.
So
Okay.
there's certain structures we want to do. And so one of the things we want to do is a promissory note of saying that company A is lending it to company B.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
and then what does that do from a tax perspective if you did do that?
so on company A, it still could be considered profit, but it's not taxable income. But what we do is we put a couple other tools in place to kind of show, which we won't talk about here, but we put a couple of tools in place to make it a non-taxable event if there were to be a taxable event on that 200,000. Okay.
Okay, so that's one way is to do like a promissory note to another company, and
Correct.
that's one way to plan that away. And then now you've utilized that $200,000 to gain a new asset
Correct.
that's hopefully going to generate more cash flow, I'd
Correct.
assume.
So let me define a promissory note really quickly.
Okay.
It's a loan. That's it.
Okay.
Company A is loaning company B. A promissory note is that the promise is that company B is going to pay company A back. Well, what's it going to pay back? What are the terms? You get to decide it. You got to put it down on paper.
Okay.
And to legitimize this paper, this promissory note, both parties need to sign and agree to the terms of the promissory note.
Could
Okay,
it be
it's a
the same
legal
person?
contractual document. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I
Why?
can be the lender and the receiver of the funds.
Why? Because in the IRS and laws guidelines, a business entity, C Corp, S Corp, LLC, partnership, are all a separate business entity or a separate
Right.
persona.
Which is
Okay.
why we all have like our EIN or whatever
That's
we've
right.
got. It is a separate entity.
It's a separate entity in law and in tax.
Right.
So the business, the entity says, Joe, I want you to be the director or the manager of or the president of this entity. Okay. And that's what the documents, the operating agreement says, or the corporate agreements, all those documents. And I also, as an entity, I'm going to give you the approval to seek lending or lend money as you see best fit for me as an entity.
Right.
So we call it a corporate minute. All it is a notation saying the business, which has no voice, its only voice is what we put on paper.
Right.
And so we have to put the voice on paper to prove that we, Joe, as the owner, you, Joe, have the ability to speak for the entity that has no voice. Okay. And so we do it in guardianships, right?
Okay.
We do it in trustees. We do it in all different areas of law. This is no different.
Right. So this is one way that we could plan away or we could plan for the cash flow and not necessarily receive a taxable event in that moment.
Correct.
Structure it properly. And I know this brings up an aside that we don't have a lot of time for right now, but I'll just make this point for anybody, because I didn't know a lot of this stuff before meeting you. And you had advised me and my former business partner about we had become an S corporation. Just through our CPA at the time had advised us, you guys are at a stage where you need to become an S corporation. It's beneficial for you. And therefore that meant a few things. One of them very notably being you must have corporate minutes. Well, guess what we sucked at?
Yeah.
We sucked at that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I would just say to any business owner out there, while as an S corporation, it's a requirement essentially by law to stay intact with what they're doing, it was an incredibly beneficial process for us to sit down every quarter. We did it quarterly and have a corporate meeting and give the corporation a voice. Like, it was actually a really valuable process.
Yeah.
So I know
especially when you have multiple owners, because it clarifies. It's kind of like when you're going to get married. It's always good to go to marriage class before you get married to talk about topics that maybe you just felt uncomfortable talking about, but they push it out there. You have to talk about it, right?
Right.
And corporate minutes allow us to do that. Now, it's not all states require corporate minutes. Okay. Some of them require maybe on an annual basis, at least once a year. Well, do you make business decisions once a year? No. Right. So what we like to do is we like to document monthly meetings. Every business has a monthly meeting. Document it. Right. Because it documents what you're going to do in that month. You reflect on last month's. We looked at the financials. We're up or we're trending or we're down. Oh, we have some opportunities coming up in this month. We're going to do this. Oh, hey, Jimmy Joe, you're going to go do this. And Susie Smith, you're going to go do this. And it lays out what we're going to do anyways. Why not put it in with the corporate entity to show what is being communicated and how the living business is living? This becomes very important if you become audited from a tax perspective, or if you ever have to go to court, you need evidence, not just, oh, you have a honest looking face. Thanks, judge. But guess what? I'm not going to believe anything you say because I have to have evidence.
Right. So that becomes part of this, and part of this cash flow planning process is you may have your corporation determine, hey, we are going to lend money to this new entity, I should say. And then this entity saying we're going to receive funds from this, and we're going to have this promissory note that goes back and forth and signed by both parties. So I mean, I know this is just one example of probably an infinite amount of scenarios that could exist. But I think, for our listeners who maybe up to this point have not been the most financially literate as far as wealth building tools, again, part of my goal with this podcast is that they every week, every time they listen, they gain a new bit of knowledge that increases their power in understanding what they can do financially to really build wealth. And I'll tell you my personal motivation behind this, because in my DNA is an entrepreneur. As far back as I know, my great-great-grandfather was an entrepreneur who moved our family from Italy, from Sicily to the Bay Area, and then generation after generation has been business owner after business owner. And oftentimes what I see happen is you live in the S or B quadrant, and you never really build wealth. You build a great lifestyle, don't get me wrong, like amazing lifestyle, fun stuff to do, lots of money, but building wealth, as I've learned from you, Bob, is a very, very different scenario. And I think that's what I'd love for our listeners to gain is, little bits of knowledge that the wealthy know and the government's not going to just come out and tell you, that really allow you to build wealth. So hopefully this has been an enjoyable podcast listen for people, and they're taking away a few positive things.
Yeah, no, awesome. I appreciate the time, Joe.